Moving on to Chapter 3, the new immigration. So in the 50 years before the Civil War, about 5 million immigrants had entered the United States. But during the period of the Civil War, immigration slowed down significantly because of the war. After the war, in the next 50 years, another 25 million immigrants came to the United States. Now there's a picture on the slideshow that shows the changes in immigration. These uneven flows of immigrants were caused by changing conditions in Europe and in the United States. We also saw that one of the huge increases was that the cost of crossing had become faster, safer, cheaper, and more comfortable. Many of the immigrants of the 1860s, 70s, and 80s had come from places like Germany, Great Britain, and Ireland, as well as the Scandinavian countries of Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. However, in the 1870s, we started to see a different variation of where people were coming from. This time, countries such as Italy, Greece, Russia, Poland, and Austria-Hungary. Now, immigration from these countries came to be known as the new immigration, while immigration from Northern and Western Europe was the old immigration. So you can see the map on this page that shows where people were coming from. We also saw during the second time of new immigration, we saw people come from Japan and China and Canada and Mexico. So by the start of the 1900s, immigration to the United States reached new heights. 6 times between 1900 and 1914, immigration exceeded 1 million people per year. Okay, and most of these, 80%, were new immigration. That is, they came from Southern and Eastern Europe. So why did they come? Most of the new immigrants came for the same reasons as the old immigrants. They had been peasants, poor farming people, and they were too poor to even stay in their own countries to make a living. So they had to look for places where they could make a new opportunity for themselves. Now, they did not all want to stay. About 1 in 3 who came to America during those years never intended to stay. Their main reason for coming to America was to earn enough money to buy land so that they could go back home. These people who wanted to go back home once they had money were called birds of passage. Now, another reason that people were coming to the Americas was that they were persecuted in their homeland. Millions of Poles, Slovaks, Slovenes, and other nationalities had been under foreign rule, and they were being persecuted. One of the Jews who fled Russia during this time gave an experience in your book. This is called a pogrom or a massacre. This is what she said. In Russian cities, and even more in the country districts where Jewish families lived scattered by special permission of the police, who were always changing their minds about letting them stay, the Gentiles or Christians would set out to kill the Jews. They attacked them with knives and clubs and scythes and axes, killed them or tortured them, and burned their homes. For many of these immigrants, they could not stay in their countries, and they had to find a new life in the United States. In the beginning, when immigrants had been coming in the old immigration wave, when asked why they came, they would say things like great open spaces and plenty of land for farming. But in the new immigration, most would say great cities and well-paid jobs in factories. This was the life that the new wave, the new immigration, were looking for. They were looking for jobs in the cities. Near the end of the 1800s, foreign-born people made up at least a third of the population of cities such as New York, Chicago, and San Francisco. No city had a bigger variety of immigrants and more of each group than New York around the 1900s. And I've added the picture of how many were living in different places on the slideshow. So how did this new wave of immigration change the cities in the United States? In most cities, there began to be new neighborhoods. There were Italian neighborhoods, Jewish neighborhoods, Polish neighborhoods, as well as German, Irish, and Greek. People from China had been arriving in America since the days of the California Gold Rush, and many of them had been helping with the railroad. They were also looking for jobs in cities throughout the country, depending on where perhaps other of their same people were living. Unfortunately, many immigrants faced discrimination and were given low-paying jobs. Sometimes new immigrants could find jobs in places like textile factories, steel mills, and meatpacking plants. They could work in cigar shops, or they could do household work for others. They could work in canneries, or they could work in the garment industry. including sometimes young children who would be helping to make money for the family. Okay. This is what some people were saying about America. Back in Europe, many of the immigrants had heard it said that in America the streets are paved with gold. Someone wrote later, though, that when they arrived in the United States, they quickly learned 3 things about that saying. First, that the streets were not paved with gold. Second, that the streets were not paved at all. And third, that they, the immigrants, were expected to pave them. And they did. Many of the cities were built by the immigrants themselves.